Okay, hello everyone. Good evening. Seems to be working okay. Let me know if there's any audio or visual issues. Put it in the chat. But I think it looks like we're okay. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll start. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhasa. Okay, so I thought that I would do a series of going through the 10 fetters, the samyojana. I think that's a good topic. I believe I've done it before, but it's worth reiterating. Uh, I'm going to do a Sakaya Ditti today, but first I'll make some preliminary remarks about the idea of the samyojana. In Theravada Buddhism, we have a system of 4 stages of awakening. As the Sotapanna, stream winner, Sakadagami, once returner, Anagami, non-returner, and a fully enlightened being is called an Arahant. And one way of distinguishing these and explaining them is by which defilements are eradicated at each stage. The 10 fetters are particular defilements which bind us to samsara. The word samyojana in a literal meaning would be like a fetter, a chain, something binding a person. And there's 10 of these, and they're broken in sequence. Certain fetters are broken at certain stages of enlightenment. And this is, in fact, a traditional diagnostic to know whether an experience is really stream entry or not, is whether the first 3 fetters are removed. And it doesn't just mean that they're suppressed or in abeyance. They're actually completely gone. They're eradicated, made like a palm tree stump, not to arise again. So there are in meditation, there can be a lot of powerful experiences that happen to people, and it's not uncommon for meditators to falsely equate an experience with enlightenment, to be confused about that, to have some powerful experience and believe that that constitutes stream entry. So it's a matter of some importance to understand the samyojanas so that one can examine one's mind. So if a person thinks they've got stream entry, the best advice is that they examine their mind for the 3 fetters, not casually and not just once, but again and again, to make sure there's no trace remaining. Because only then can you feel some confidence that the experience is actually stream entry. So the first 3 fetters, the ones that are eradicated at stream entry, all are associated with something to do with right view. The 3 fetters are Sakaya Ditti, Silabhata Paramasa, and Vicikiccha. The ordinary translations, the most common translations, let's say, are personality view, right and ritual clinging, and skeptical doubt. Now, none of these translations are to be relied on, and I think that's a good general rule if you want to really understand Dhamma, is not to overly rely on the common English translations, because they're often not quite right and can lead to confusion. So today we're going to talk about the first fetter, Sakaya Ditti. A literal translation of the term would be own body view. Ditti is view. It's the first factor of the Eightfold Path is samadhi, right view, or perfect view. And Ditti is something more than a belief or an opinion. It's more fundamental than that. It's the way we view the world, our underlying assumptions, our basic the basic framework or matrix in which we construct our reality. It's how we view things. It's kind of close to the German philosophical term Weltanschauung. It's how we understand the world we live in and our own nature is the view. And the Buddha talked about many different kinds of false view, and the Brahmajala Sutta lists 62. But elsewhere, it's simplified to the two main categories of false view, or eternalism and annihilationism. That is Sasatawada and Uchedawada. Now, personality view, Sakaya Ditti, is on the level view. It's believing either implicitly or explicitly in a abiding, real, substantial self. That I am something abiding, intrinsic. There is in me something intrinsic, eternal, unchanging, and real. This is a self-view. Now, for many people, this is just and it's not thought out. It's just a kind of underlying assumption, but it can be elaborated into doctrines and theories. In the Indian context, this would be the view of the Atman. The idea that there's an eternal, abiding spirit, soul, what have you, in a person, as like a man going to bed at night. He takes off his clothes and goes to bed, and in the morning he wakes up and puts on fresh clothes. So the man is like the Atman, and the clothes are like a body. He just assumes a new body. In the Buddhist theory, of course, we have the anatta doctrine, the idea of not self, and the explication of this in the terms of the five aggregates, that the being is composed of body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. And none of these are essential or permanent or abiding. There's a continuum of cause and effect. So assuming that there is something this is a Sakaya has attained to an analogy would be like an ordinary educated adult person cannot believe in Santa Claus. You can imagine Santa Claus, you can even pretend or pretend or imagine what it would be like to meet Santa Claus. The concept is conceivable to you at that level. but it's not possible for you to believe in it. It just slides off the mind. It's just not, no, it can't be such a thing. No. So that's like a Sakaya Ditti to a stream enter. It feels like a childish superstition. It's not something that makes any sense anymore. Now, as we'll see later when we get into the Sakaya Ditti isn't complete of the idea at the level of concept, of Ditti. One sees this, and it's not like something is destroyed. It's like you see, oh, it's never been there in the first place. It's not like you're trying to destroy yourself because it's realizing you never had one. But there still remains subtle trace that's only overcome by the arahant that we call asmi mana. We'll talk about that more later, but I'll just say in brief here that occurs at the level of perception, not at the level of cognition. So one of the corollaries, non-reality of self through Sakaya Ditti, and if the self is taken out of the picture, they become kind of meaningless concepts. Like, what are you talking about? The self is eternal, or the self is eradicated. There's no self to talk about. So these are kind of become meaningless kind of delusions. There's a story in the commentary to the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Sutta of the Buddha's last days. In the sutta, it tells how Ananda failed to ask the Buddha to remain for a kappa, and it says that Mara addled his mind, confused his mind, and the commentary explains that by saying, as Ananda was already a stream winner, Mara had no power to affect his mental formations in that way, and his concepts, or at that level he was beyond, since he was beyond the sense of self, he was beyond eternalism and annihilationism. He couldn't fall into false view. Mara attacked him on a deep level to an expression of this playing out of this idea of the different levels of self reference in the 10 samyojanas. But here we're talking about the first level overcome by the stream enterer. So this also means that one of the defilements that the stream enterer cannot be subject to is miccaditthi, false view. Now, this of course does not mean that a stream enterer is all-knowing or omniscient. It's far from that. It just means that they cannot fall into those grossly wrong views of eternalism or annihilationism. They can no longer believe in a self that's either eternal or a self that is eradicated. So Sayaditi view, or more literally own body, and body here, kaya, it doesn't really mean the physical body. It means the psychophysical organism. The kaya as body has a more general use, as meaning any sort of compounded thing could be called kaya. So there's a belief that this is me, this is mine. That's the kaya ditti. And eradicating Sakaya Ditti is another way of saying that a person has a realization of anatta. Uh, the doctrine of anatta is a very important central one in Buddhism, and it's not possible to fully appreciate or enter into that doctrine prior to stream entry. One can become closer and closer to it, rather like can approach it, but so I'll stop there and continue a discussion based on what you good people put into the chat for me. Okay, I'm not seeing anything yet. Okay, here comes something. Okay, let's see what we got here. Do fetters have to be removed in groups so sensual pleasure cannot be removed without ill will? Also, any tips for removing ill will in particular? Is that they get attenuated at almost stage. So it can feel like someone might feel like they have no ill will, but they still have sensual desire. But at the stage of anagami, they're both eradicated. Tips for removing ill will. Well, the best basic advice is to practice metta meditation. And a good time, particularly to do metta meditation, to really make it work in the depth, is to do it at night before going to sleep. Okay. In Theravada view, is chitta not actually synonymous with vijnana plus other rupa khandas and something beyond that, beyond space and time? Perhaps. Okay, that's a really big question. That's one I've discussed elsewhere at length, because it doesn't admit of a neat answer. It depends, and when you say Theravada view, it depends which Theravada view you're talking about. In the Abhidhamma and Visuddhimagga tradition, chitta and vijnana would be seen as more or less synonymous. Arising in chitta's use is a term that's almost exclusively used in the Abhidhamma. Vijnana is in the suttas, and vijnana seems to be chitta occurring in practice, in actual real context through the sense organs, and chitta is more of a consciousness in the abstract. If you go to the Thai forest tradition, though, they Ajahn Mun in particular talks about chitta as a really primordial kind of consciousness that's and he even says at one point outside the five khandha, which is quite heretical from the more orthodox Visuddhimagga kind of view. So it's something that you can study into this question, and it's doesn't really give an easy answer because there are different schools of thought on that. How is the day-to-day experience of one without Sakaya Ditti different from a worldling? Well, that's a good question. I would say that there's less suffering. A large degree of suffering has been removed from the being because there's no more sense of needing to protect or cherish the self. But it's subtle. It's on a more internal or subtle level. The stream enter still has can still have desires, can still have ill will or anger. It's not a complete purification. It's a purification at the level of view, and it starts the process. That's what's called stream enter, because it's just the beginning. You're just entering the stream. Dear Ajahn, what is eons of lives lived, countless varieties of experiences and memories to an awakened one when he dies, never to be born again? Merely dreams within dreams. They won't be cognizant of those memories at all, which errs on the side of him. Well, we can't an arahant after death. In practical application, if I am able to see how my ego generally functions and behaves, where do I go from there? Do I cultivate path adjacent senses of self or try to discover alternative egos? Well, maybe we should distinguish between the concept of ego and self, or atta. Ego is a psychological term. It's not really related to the Buddhist theory at all. It's a Western psychological term, and we could say it's a self-organizing principle in the mind or in the psychology. And it's not the same thing as atta. Atta is more essential. So the ego is who's overcome, but there's then thing, fluid and conditional things. So as you say, try to discover new alternative egos. This is, you can remake yourself in that way, because you don't see anything as being permanent or essential. Next one, not much is written on Sakadagami. Is Sotapanna on the Satagami fault by default, the third individual? Is there a sign that could be understood as Sakadagami path? Yeah, that's another question that is kind of a vexed one, is the 4 pairs, the 8 kinds of beings, and whether someone who's a stream enter is, as you say, by default on the Sakadagami path or not. My own view would be not necessarily. Someone might be a stream enter and not really striving for anything higher, although eventually they will. Within 7 lifetimes, they might not be at the 3rd path yet. Sakadagami, of the 4 stages, it probably has the least kind of coverage, and it's also said to be a difficult one to actually recognize or diagnose, because the fetters, we'll get to this later, but the 2 fetters of sensual desire and ill will are not removed totally at that stage, but are attenuated. So it's not such a clear dividing line. Let's see, next one. Lungpa Samedo suggests staying patiently with the mind object so to be able to watch its cessation. I tried to do that many times with a song I was hearing in my mind, but every time I found that with continued focused attention in the mind object, I was actually sustaining it. Do you have any suggestions? Like attention to a kind, and it's a subtle difference, but if the attention's of the wrong kind, then you are sustaining the object. But if there's enough distance in the mind, and you're looking at the object as if it was external and not taking an interest or not having any desire, not feeding it any energy, then you can watch it fade. That's easier to do with very simple objects, but once it's like a song repeating itself in the mind, it's a more difficult thing to do. I would suggest maybe trying to break it up in terms of seeing individual notes or words and seeing how they fade before you see the whole thing. A good source to understand that view. I listen to music a lot during the day for The 8 precepts states not to engage in entertainment, but I use the music as a form of meditation. Well, it depends. If you're keeping the 8 precepts, then yeah, you're breaking the precept by engaging in musical, entertaining yourself with music. But if you're basically keeping the 5 precepts, then there's no harm in listening to music. And some kinds of music can be more spiritualized than others, and can have a tendency to elevate consciousness. I would think of things like some kinds of classical music, especially maybe like Bach or Gregorian chants, and that certain genre here. I did not receive your last answer because the stream is quite slow and laggy. Yeah, I've noticed that video was kind of glitching a bit. I hope the audio was getting through. I am using the Ethernet cable, but it's maybe not making enough difference. How is the kitchen project? Yeah, thank you for asking. For those who don't know, we are building or planning to build a new kitchen. We haven't gotten very far with it yet. We're still really in the fundraising and planning stage. We've fundraised now probably about $10,000, but we need considerably more than that to probably need about $200,000 to do it properly. The old kitchen is really on its last legs. That building was never designed to last this long. It was supposed to be a temporary building built 40, 50 years ago, actually. And we want to do a new kitchen that'll last. Do you have a perspective on the experiential difference between the moment when someone becomes Sakadagami as opposed to Sotapanna, besides the recognition of changing fetters? Well, what I could say about it is that each of the 4 stages is a deeper, more comprehensive entry into the unconditioned. Stream entry is really just like a parting of the curtain, and the meditator sees, oh, there is nibbana, there is an unconditioned, but he hasn't fully entered into it. He doesn't fully understand it. It's beyond his ken, but he has no more doubt about it, which we'll get to with the fetter on Wichikitcha. And Sakadagami is a deeper entry into Nibbana, and so on with each stage. One of our monks came up with an analogy that it's like you're wandering in a blizzard, in a snowstorm, and that's samsara, or the unenlightened mind. And you come across a cabin, and there's light coming through the window and smoke coming out of the chimney. And you look in the window and see it looks warm and cozy inside. You now have cabin, and you feel the warm air, and you have more of an experience of it. Anagami is like you open the window some more and get your head and shoulders in. And then Arahant is you're inside, sitting in a cozy chair by the fire. Someone asked how to donate to the project. Okay, go on our website. I'll put the address in the chat. And on the front page, in the lower left-hand corner, there's a button to take you to a page about the Kitchen Project and all the information about it and how to donate and so forth. Okay, so I think maybe we can wind it down for this week and see you again next week. And next week we'll do Silabeta Paramasa, which is, I think, is the one that I think most people misunderstand. So it'd be useful to talk about it. Okay, bye.